So we want to look at the game theory. Game, every day we are playing a game of life, a game of success, a game of business. So game theory is the discipline that helps you make decisions which are based on your knowledge, rationalities, information. Now in the game theory, these are the areas that we are supposed to cover. Number one, we look at the introduction, the meaning, the characteristics, and then finally the assumption. Then number two, components. We look at the strategies, the player, and the payoff. These are the components which informs game theory. Then we look at the principles. There are two principles, max-min principle and the minimax principle. This principle is cascaded from the players. So max-min principle is a maximizing player and minimax principle is a minimizing player. Then finally we look at the computation. How do you prepare the game theory? So the preparation and the presentation, introduction part of it. So for us to understand game theory, there are two words here. There's a game and there is a theory. What do you mean by a game? A game is a physical or mental competition conducted according to the rules with the participant in direct opposition to each other. So in other words, when you talk about a game, there is a rule and there are participants. And the participants have different interests, opposing interests. An activity that one engage in for amusement or fun. That's according to the dictionary definition. What is a theory? A theory is a belief, policy, or procedure proposed or followed as the basis of action. So when you talk about a theory, it's just a belief, a policy, or a procedure proposed or followed as a basis of action. So for you to take action, there are beliefs, there are policies, there are procedures which must be followed. A system of explanation that ties together a whole bunch of facts. It not only explains those facts, but predicts what you ought to find from other observation and experiment. So anytime you talk about a game, it is a system of explanation, and it doesn't only explain the facts but also brings into understanding the observation and the experiment. So these are two critical terminologies which are married together. So when you marry now the word game theory, it is a type of decision theory which is concerned with the decision making in a situation where two or more rational opponents are involved and condition of competition and conflicting interest is involved. So when you talk about game theory, it is decision. We are bringing in decision making analysis. We are bringing in the situations, and there are two critical situations. There is a condition of competition and there is condition of conflicting interest. So for a game to be a game, there should be a decision to be made, there should be a situation, and the situation should be competitive situation. Now the definition of game theory: the branch of mathematics concerned with the analysis of strategies for dealing with competitive situation where the outcome of the participant choice of action depend critically on the actions of other participants. So that is a game. A game is just a mathematical concern, a mathematical analysis. Use formulas, use equations, use models, use probabilities to identify the outcome of a particular course of action. That is game theory. So game theory is defined as an activity between two or more persons according to the set of rules at the end of which each person receives some benefits or satisfaction or suffers a loss. So anytime you're dealing with the game theory, remember there is involvement of parties, and these parties must follow particular rules, and these rules will give out some outcomes, and the outcomes can be beneficial, can be satisfaction, or can suffer. People can suffer the loss. So there is a winner and there is a loser. Therefore, in a game, there are two or more opposite sides, parties with conflicting interests. There are two opposing sides. In every game, there are two opposing sides. They know the objectives and the role of the game. So they are very aware what are the objectives and what are the rules of the game. Every game must have a role. You can't play a game without a role. It is the role that makes a game very interesting, very entertaining. When one player wins, his opponent loses. That is critical. If one wins, the other one will lose the game. Now, where do we apply game theory? We apply it in law. Lawyers make use of, when you go to court of law, you have a grievance. Law is applicable in game theory. Politicals, politicians will apply game theory. Farmers will apply game theory. Education, scholars, in teaching, in every research, game theory is applicable. In war, when nations are warring, when families have war, it is the game theory that is applied. In business, competition in business, business of different levels and dynamics, game theory is applicable. Now, what are the characteristics of game theory? So the following are the characteristics of game theory. Number one, they are finite number of competitors called players. So the people involved in a player are finite. They are known. To each player has a list of finite number of possible course of action. So again, they are aware what are the course of action, the actions that they must take. When each of the player chooses a single course of action from the list of course of action available to them. So when a player takes a particular course of action, it is because of his own personal decision. Every play is associated with outcome. Every player, when you play a game, there must be an outcome, and that is outcome called payoff. The possible gain or loss of each player depend on only the choice made by opponent. So the possible gain or loss of each player is based on the choices made by the opponent. If the opponent wins, the other one gains. If the other one gains, the other one loses. So that's all about the game. But also, the choices made is by his opponent. So when an opponent makes a choice, it will affect the outcome. Now, what are the assumptions? You know, assumptions create direction, create purpose. So the following are the assumptions. Number one assumption is the player acts rationally and intelligently. So the player will always be rational, well informed, and intelligent, using information. Number two, each player has been given a set of possible course of action. So the player is aware about the set of course of action. Number three, the player attempt to maximize gains or minimize losses. So the attempt here is you want to maximize your gain or you want to minimize your losses. For all relevant information are known to each other. So the information which are supposed to be used are in the awareness of the players. So the players are very much aware of what is all about the game. The player makes individual decision. So the player will choose decision on the basis of their individual information. The players simultaneously select the respective course of action. So there's that simultaneous selection of course of action. Payoff is fixed. and determine in advance. So the payoff are already out in public domain, in the domain of the player. So these are the assumptions. Let's look at the components of game theory. So there are three components of game theory. Number one is strategy. What do you mean by strategy? This strategy of player is predominant rule by which a player decides his course of action during the game. There is a strategy for a given player, a set of a rule or a program that specify which of the available course of action issue select a free play. Now what we are trying to say is that strategies are this course of action, the way a player can undertake an event or course of action. So there are two types of strategies. We have pure strategy. As part of the decision, always choose a particular course of action. It is a predetermined course of action. If it is pure, it is predetermined. Mixed strategy. When a player does not adopt single strategy, the player does not know in advance. So this is where now the probability comes in. This is where the maximum and the minimum principle is not applicable. The subtle point cannot be used in the mixed strategy. Number two component is player, a participant of the game, the person who chooses the course of action, that is a player. Then finally, payoff, that's number three component, the outcome which a player gets after taking a particular course of action. So that is very critical. So these are the three components, and we will be looking